can I follow up on that question? Was it easier politically to go to conventions or to stay with legislatures? Which was the easier political process?
It was much easier to go to the state ratifying conventions because many of the legislatures themselves wanted to keep the power they had. Under the Articles of Confederation, the states had much more power than the weak central government, and in the new proposed constitution, they would lose much of that power.
Also, if the framers had decided to go to the state legislatures and stick with the Articles of Confederation method of changing or amending that constitution, the Constitution would never have been ratified because Rhode Island would have absolutely vetoed everything. They didn't even show up to the Constitutional Convention, basically believing that they would have a de facto veto.
Why do you think that the framers sent the Constitution to the states with neither an endorsement nor a condemnation? Was this a wise decision? Why or why not?
I would say that yes, it was a wise decision. This allowed for the people to, unlike today where we are so influenced by so much campaigning and media, this allowed the people to make a decision based solely on the document itself without being fully influenced from all these other outside parties.
Additionally, I would say that another great facet of how the Constitution itself was drafted was that the Philadelphia Convention was held in secret. In today's media, I don't think this could ever work because there's so much transparency in government.
Was slavery much of an issue in the ratification debate?
Slavery was actually an avoided issue because they realized that the tensions between the anti-slavery North and the pro-slavery South ran so deep that if they debated the legality or the morality of slavery, which Oliver Ellsworth believed were considerations belonging to the states themselves, then the Constitution would never have been ratified because they could have not gotten over those issues, and no establishment of a ruling on the legality of slavery could have been reached.
Additionally, they went to extreme ends in order to not mention the word slave or slavery in the Constitution, even through such clauses as the 3/5 clause and the Fugitive Slave Clause.
Why the premium on secrecy? The Constitution was drafted in secret, and then it was these what we would now call op-ed pieces. In the newspapers were using pseudonyms rather than the people's the author's real names. Isn't that bothersome? And why the need for that?
I believe that the need for that was simply that in order to do something of such magnitude, that politics had to be removed from the equation. They had to be able to assert their views and say what they actually needed to say without worrying about public backlash.
Also, when the framers went into the Philadelphia Convention in secrecy, there came a point when they realized there was no longer they weren't going to be able to simply amend the Articles of Confederation in order to create what they wanted. They were going to have to completely disregard that entire document and create something entirely new. And they knew that if this was being done completely in the public before the little things were worked out, that would not go over well with the people.
Additionally, during the convention itself, Madison's notes are the only remaining relics we have of anything that happened there. And the instructions that was given to his son when he was to publish them was after every single delegate had died, as to not tarnish anybody's reputation while he was still alive.
Going back to the slavery issue, why was it so important for the delegates to make the decision not to stop the importation of slavery until 1808?
I believe that was important just to get the southern states to ratify it, because if they had placed an outright ban on the importation of slaves, basically what they did was they pushed it off to the next generation and said, we don't want to deal with this issue, we'll let you handle it after we take care of the matter at hand, which is getting rid of the Articles of Confederation and establishing a new system of government.
Was it only the people in the South who were involved with the slave trade?
No, the slave trade itself was centered all around the coastal United States as it was then. So there was slaves in the quote-unquote free states as we think of them in the Civil War, as well as in the southern states.
What role did newspapers and the press play in the ratification debate?
Well, the Anti-Federalist and Federalist papers were constantly circulating. There were different pamphlets going around. And the Federalists advocating for immediate ratification of the Constitution, whereas the Anti-Federalists wanted more deliberation and would not ratify without a Bill of Rights. These things were greatly being circulated, and and influencing the people.
Especially in the state of New York, the Federalist Papers were key in making sure the state would ratify the Constitution, because without the state of New York, most certainly our country would not be the same.
Also, the use of newspapers and pamphlets was important to bring the citizens into the process. John Jay wrote a document called The Address to the People of New York, which sort of simplified the views as opposed to the more political and hard to understand Federalist Papers, and brought them and allowed them to see the arguments in a simple format.
Tell me more about the international precedent set, or the influence on the ratification process had in other countries that you referenced in your opening statement.
Yes. Currently, in the 1993 Constitution of Poland, our ratification style of allowing the people to vote in order to allow for or electors to vote and ratify their constitution was used so that they could get away from their communist-style leanings that they had previously had.
Anything else? Any other references, historical references that you can think of?
The recent Constitution of Iraq was done so by a national referendum, continuing the philosophy of giving the people the power to decide what governs them.
Also, in the Treaty of Lisbon, Ireland would not ratify it. They therefore went into a second national referendum, also using our methods.
Do you think there was anything fortuitous in the way that the states took up the Constitution to be ratified?
It's not necessarily fortuitous, but it was rather cunning on the part of the Federalists. In the state of Virginia, notably, they held the ratification convention so early that they almost secluded the western half of the state from the proceedings, letting the Federalist-centered eastern part of the state quickly pass and vote for
what state was that?
Constitution. Virginia.